Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty crucial, I think. We're taking a classic invention, the printing press, and we're sort of reframing it entirely. We're not here to talk about the inventor. We're looking at what happened after the invention, at the system that let it scale.
It's such an easy historical trap to fall into, celebrating that one moment of genius, but it's only half the story. The real history isn't in the blueprint, it's in the adoption.
Right.
So today we're analyzing how early modern cities didn't just use this technology, they fully integrated it. It became essential urban infrastructure.
And the main idea we pulled from the sources is,
Yeah.
it's striking, maybe a little cynical. The press didn't spread because of this sudden love for enlightenment or literacy. It spread because cities desperately needed it.
They absolutely needed it. You have to set aside that romantic idea of scholars just yearning for knowledge. When a technology scales that fast, it's because existing power structures, governments, merchants, cities, they absorb the tool. And then they change the whole world around it to fit what it can do.
So this is about a functional necessity, a novelty that became a utility.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack that transformation.
Yeah.
Because once the press left the inventor's hands, it was, what, like a chain reaction?
It really was. It multiplied almost instantly, not just spreading across Europe, but changing its whole structure within the cities themselves.
How so?
Well, you see this huge physical and organizational shift right out of the gate. The initial process was probably confined to these small, secretive workshops.
Except under lock and key.
Right. And it moves from that private world, from secrecy, and spills right out into the streets. It becomes a system. And that's the moment a clever trick becomes a real commercial industry.
Okay, so when that happens, when an experiment becomes infrastructure, what does that actually look like on the ground?
The physical presence tells the whole story. Infrastructure needs space, it needs standards, reliable supply chains. In cities like Venice or Antwerp, printing houses weren't hidden away. They were big, visible businesses right near the paper mills and the financial district.
So less like a quiet library, more like a factory floor.
A lot more like a factory. They weren't just making pretty books, they were churning out standardized, repeatable content that you needed for trade and for law.
And what was the measurable outcome? What really cemented it as an essential utility?
The sources point to two huge transformations. First, the product itself changes. Books stop being these luxury collectibles and they become essential tools. Yeah, standardized, portable, necessary for, immediate practical use, calculating interest, drafting a legal contract, stuff like that.
Can you give us a concrete example? Because I think we all just jump to the Bible when we think of early printing.
Sure. Think beyond religious texts. Printers started making standardized ledgers for accounting, geometry guides for engineers, and crucially, annual almanacs.
Right, and the almanacs weren't just fortune-telling.
Not at all. I mean, they had that, but they also had standardized tables for planting times, for tidal patterns, navigation data. They were basically the essential utility software of their day.
That makes perfect sense. And the second major transformation, you said there were two.
The second is maybe even bigger. Information itself becomes currency.
Currency.
Yes. It becomes a tradable, valuable asset. Think about standardized bills of exchange for international trade, or lists of commodity prices sent between port cities. The speed and the reliability of printed info allowed money to move faster and further than ever before.
And when something becomes currency, the technology behind it isn't optional anymore.
It's foundational.
Which leads us right into our next section. Who was driving all of this, and what were their often conflicting motivations?
And that's the key, that they were conflicting. You have all these different stakeholders pushing and pulling the technology for their own reasons. It's why it all scaled so explosively.
Okay, let's break them down. First, our sources say you had the cities.
Yeah.
For them, it was pure opportunity.
Yeah, for a city like Venice or Antwerp, the press was a competitive advantage. They realized that if you could attract the best printers, you were also attracting wealth and talent.
So they'd court them.
Absolutely. They'd offer tax breaks, subsidized housing, even monopolies on certain kinds of printing, all to become these hubs of commerce and intellect. They were building an ecosystem.
Then you have the merchants. And for them, it was much simpler. It was just profit.
Just profit. The mass production of commercial paperwork ledgers, contracts, pamphlets, it created entirely new markets out of thin air. It reduced their risk in trade. It let capital flow more efficiently. Profit was the engine.
And finally, the third group. The one you can never avoid, governments. And what they saw, above all else, was control.
And this is where it gets tense. Governments realized this was the ultimate tool for centralized authority. You could mass produce official decrees, tax rolls, regulations, and enforce your will uniformly across huge territories faster than ever before.
So if the goal was total control, why did they just nationalize it, make printing a state monopoly like minting coins?
That is the critical tension right there. They needed the speed and scale that only private, competitive, profit-driven businesses could provide.
Ah, so it would have been too slow and expensive for the state to do it alone.
Far too slow. They relied on merchant capital, on entrepreneurial hustle to build the infrastructure fast. Their strategy became, in a way, let the merchants build the tracks, but we'll control the switches.
A trade-off then. Sovereign control versus commercial velocity.
Precisely. And the press scaled because it served all three masters at once: the city's need for infrastructure, the merchant's need for profit, and the sovereign's need for control. A perfect, if very unstable, storm.
That unstable convergence is a great jumping-off point for the big takeaways here. We've distilled 4 key lessons from this period about how technology and infrastructure get adopted.
Right. And the first is the most foundational: system adoption. Technology spreads fastest when systems adopt it, not just individuals.
It's not one scholar wanting one book.
Exactly. It's the new universities needing to standardize textbooks for hundreds of students at once. Once the University of Paris says we're using these printed books, well, the press becomes a mandatory part of the education system overnight. That creates a guaranteed demand.
So if the system drives adoption, that brings us to the second lesson, which is about power, shifting control. Control moves from the creators of the tech to the institutions that scale it.
That's right. The individual printer, the craftsman, he might have the know-how, but setting up a big print shop was staggeringly expensive. So once a city council or a banking consortium puts up the capital, they start calling the shots.
The power shifts from the inventor to the investor.
It always does. The power migrates to the capital.
Which sets the stage for the third lesson about scale. Information becomes power only when it scales widely.
This is such a critical point. If the press had just stayed in a few aristocratic courts, it would have been a novelty, a footnote. But because it's scaled across the entire urban infrastructure, reaching thousands of people at once, that's when the information inside those pages got real political and economic force.
Can you give us a specific example of that? The difference between a manuscript and a mass-produced pamphlet.
Of course. Look at the start of the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther's 95 Theses. In manuscript form, it might have reached a few dozen scholars.
Okay.
But the moment it was printed, standardized, and shot out across 5 major German cities, it became a phenomenon of scale. The velocity from the press turned an academic dispute into a mass political movement. Scale was the catalyst for power.
That leads directly to the final observation, which feels very modern. Cities shape ideas more than individuals.
It's a powerful conclusion from the sources. Cities are the ultimate testing grounds. Their density, the flow of commerce, the political pressures, they amplify and distill ideas way more aggressively than any isolated environment. The city itself is like a machine for turning theories into realities.
So the environment is the filter. It decides which ideas are strong enough to scale.
Exactly. The city provided the capital, the audience, the supply chains, and the political pressure cooker. It provided everything needed to turn an invention into the engine of the modern world.
So to bring it all together, we started with a simple machine and found its real story was in becoming this foundational urban infrastructure. The system mattered more than the genius.
That's the core arc. The press moved beyond the inventor's control and became this essential feature defining how knowledge, commerce, and power flowed. It created a level of coordination that was previously unimaginable, but it also introduced this new, unpredictable volatility.
And if we take that idea that information became currency once the technology scaled, what does that mean for us today? Today, when the cost of producing and distributing information is basically zero, if anyone can mint that currency, does the sheer scale of it all break the system? Or does it just redefine what has value? That's something for you to think about.
A truly challenging question.
The transformation of the printing press into infrastructure was swift, but it was not unchallenged. The next crucial phase of this history is when printing collides with authority, and the first resistance begins.